Here's a 1986 Carrier unit. It's got two blowers. I've got the disconnect turned off, but need to oil some of these. And the one here on the right, if I go through here and give the put the flashlight in here like this. If I take and move the blower here by hand, it'll move fairly easy. And I've gone through here and snuck in some oil right in the end of the motor shaft up in there with a zoom spout. And this other one on the left side here, if you go through and you watch, the tends to slow down much quicker. And I've put some oil here on the shaft, which is hard to see, but if I put my hand over here where the hub is, you can't oil this side. There's a little hole you sometimes can sneak in, but there's a metal piece. I can feel it's warm. And as a comparison, if I go over here on the same size motor and reach my hand around here and feel the hub, it's really cool. So I know that bushing on this left side here is starved for oil. And I put some Mobil 1 on this in 1997, and I actually pulled the whole blower out. And I put some in just last year. I put some last fall on the shaft here, but that's not what it is. So I'm going to have to pull the entire blower out. The way you do this, there's 4 screws here. 1, 2, 3. The 4th one here, and it'll slide out. It's got like a captive piece right here. It's held on. A guide. So you can undo those 4 screws, and then you got to take this box, undo it, and kind of move it out of the way. You can slide the whole blower out. And then I'm going to go through and get to the other end of the motor to oil it. This is 30 years. And I haven't been running it that much this year, but it was making a little bit of noise, and so I know this motor is drawing more current. You can go put a current probe around here when it's running, and you can measure the current will be higher because it's drawing more, it's got more drag on it. The other way is when you turn it off, normally it'll freewheel for a while. Okay, once I've undone the screws, you got to get in here and kind of manhandle the thing back and forth, and kind of need kind of like a cookie cutter knife to get in there and separate where it's stuck to earth like this. Free up the dust now. It's starting to come forward. I'm going to go ahead and do this on Saturday. This is Thursday, but I want to go ahead and break this thing free because I always know it's kind of hard to do. You can squirt some WD-40 on the rails, but this hasn't been pulled out since 1998. I'm taking the control box out just so I can slide the fan off. I've just got a wire there to hold it up, the control box. Now I'm going to have to undo the motor wind. You can see up to see it's got the common and a high and a low. Even though it's kind of marked there, I usually mark in pencil just to avoid mistakes. I had to kind of wiggle these a while before they'd come out. I don't want to force them. Here's what the end looks like. Now I got to undo the safety. Get them yanking the wires out. This is a double unit, so it's wires flying everywhere. This is going to go up on top here. This is past this, and this is just about past all that stuff. Make sure it's not going to What'll happen is if you've got this thing hanging a wire, you're by yourself, you'll tend to pull this thing out and you'll get hung up on a wire. So you want to use a bunch of stuff to hold the wires in place and not angle and rip out one of the wires. Of course the power's off, it's just that you can end up screwing on the verge of being pulled out of there. This time again, make sure you got no wires hung up on anything. I'm going to go ahead and okay, here it comes. It's not all that heavy, but check all the rust out on top of this unit here. "30-year-old furnace." There's the left furnace. There's the right furnace. So I'm going to oil the motor. It hasn't been pulled out in 19 years. 1997 I oiled the one shaft you can get at a few years back, a couple times, but the one that you can't get at I've got to oil. I'll take the vacuum cleaner and get a bunch of this stuff up here. It'll spin, but I know that the one hub here is much drier. One over here, yeah, it kind of makes some noise, so it's going to amp and end up having to replace the motor, which is just, it's not even the cost. The labor to pull the sucker out of here and swap over the blowers and stuff takes some time. There's a packing peanut stuck in there. So I'm going to vacuum all this. It's actually fairly clean. It's been pulled out since 1997. Sometimes they'll get all clogged up in some places. We run filtrate filters on this building, so it keeps fairly clean. It's nasty in there, but I've seen where they get totally caked up. Okay, there's the one oil place you can put oil in. And what I've been doing is I've been just sticking a stick dowel and oiling the end of the shaft, which tends to get in here. Here I can go get a pair of long forceps and pull that out to oil it. The sister one I had from Harbor Freight to go through there and open up the plug. Now the plug is captive on this particular motor from Westinghouse, which is good, which means you're not going to drop it. So I'm going to go ahead and put some oil in there, some Mobil 1, and then close that one up. Okay, I got the zoom. Actually, I use Mobil 1. This is some 10W30 synthetic motor oil. It's what I put on last time back 19 years ago, so I'm going to assume it's probably okay. It's the zoom spout, and I've put the oil in another container, and then I'm putting Mobil 1 in there. Here I've got the zoom spout. And the oil, it's hole it's easiest to get to. I'm just going to put some in there, spin it around, wait. That's actually filling up a felt piece that's in there. You just fill it up to the top and wait. Got the unit pushing up in an angle, and there's the oil plug. I've actually gone through and put some oil right at the end of the shaft to drop it down in there. It's almost like this oil plug thing. It's either clogged up, but putting some right on the end of the shaft, wicking it in there, just made this thing way easier. On this, loosened it way up. So, I'm going to get a little oil in that way too. Might be that it's just all compacted and dried up and takes a while for it to wick through on the oiler there. But I will put some on the end of the shaft just for good measure too. Got to be careful, sometimes things are over oiled, they can blow the seals out. I've just put 2-3 drops, probably 10 drops on the end to let it wick down in there. Here's the hemostats I've used to put the plug back in place. If you leave the plug off, what happens, you can get some crap in there. And I don't know, if you're purist, you should probably try to put the plug back on. If you can't really get it on, it's not the end of the world. It just got an entry where you'll get some dirt in there. There's a wick on there anyway, so kind of like a fiber thing. So if you had put some sand in there, it's probably never going to get to the darn bushing because there's a big felt ring in there. It can probably prevent it drying out a little bit easier. Get some trash from this particular unit. There is a extra hole right here. Not sure if it was done for balance or not. You can turn that towards the top position and put the zoom spot in and try to get it down here, or you can try to feed it down through this way to get it to the end of the shaft. The proper way, which is a lot more labor, is take the whole unit apart. That's probably another half hour. One to pull the motor. It's got one motor for 2 blowers. Each blower wheel is captive between, it's riveted, at least the wheel is captive between this unit. So you can undo this and pull the motor out, pull this, unbolt this and pull this unit out, but you're going to get the the blower housing plus the blower wheel. You do the same thing on here, and then there's 3 or 4 bolts that hold the motor on. So you're really not taking the side off on this thing. This side, the metal piece, and this side all hold together with the blower wheel. Same thing with this. So if you undo the wheels, undo the straps between the two, you can separate them. When you can take this one off, then you get at the motor, undo the screws onto this, and pull the motor out. Now, one way you can do is if you get this one off here, you can probably get the hemostat in here and get back at this one that's down into here. But to actually replace the motor, you got to undo both blowers, blower wheels, split the unit apart. It's a lot of work. And I've wicked some oil in here, and now you can see I'm just turning this by hand, and you'll see it tends to go fairly easy. I wasn't able to get at the cap on there. What I did is I spread one of these open. I didn't do that last time, but I just did it this time and was able to see the end of the shaft, had the whole housing vertical, and put about 10 to 20 drops of oil and then spun it. And it freely got into the oilite bearing. Now what I'm doing is I'm vacuuming out the crap that's on here. There's crud that's down inside these. You can scrape off and then take a vacuum cleaner and get it out. Okay, I did this more for the video. You don't really have to do this. I actually bent one of the blower wheels, which is really bad to do. You don't want to do that. But anyways, the shaft, that end is in here. What I do is I take the zoom spout, go up underneath here, feel the end of the shaft, and wick some in there. And then I go through and turn this around, move it up and down, and now it turns freely. That one that was dry, the action is just totally different. Instead of just stopping in a fraction of a second, it'll freewheel like mad. That's a good sign. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this sort of vertical for a while to go ahead and see if I can get some into the oilite bearing, into the wick area. Spin this around, let gravity take some action. Bend back the one I shouldn't have done. I've actually seen sometimes I'll actually build them with a hemisphere cutout here, so you can get at the, take the set screw off if it's on the inside or an oiling area. I've seen on one commercial unit years ago where they had, you know, oil here and they had a notch here to get at it. But I've got the oil where it needs to be now, so I'm happy. This hole here I mentioned earlier, you can go ahead and punch or put a hole here. You sure don't want to get the thing out of balance, so if you put one on the other side here, you may be okay. But if you get it to right here, you put like a little 1/4 inch hole, even less. You can get the zoom spout in and hit the end of the motor. Is another quick way to do it without taking the whole unit apart. I mean, the time it takes on this particular dual one to take this apart is a bunch of work, and it can be to where, you know, they tend to be rusted on. Got to make sure if you do that you get the height and everything right. Normally you just do that on these units when the motor goes bad. This unit here has actually got the original cap from 1984, which is amazing. So what I do is, this is the one side you can't get at very often. I oil this one, sneak a tube in here, and that's the one that you can see. And so it tends to be a little bit more cantilevered over the way this is. So you might have a little bit more. Here's a doofus thing. When I took this little side cover off, which probably didn't have to be done, I dropped the screw. Go in here and hold the flashlight at an angle, and there's the screw right there. Yeah, I need to vacuum all this crap out too. You can clean that clean. See, going again. Here we are vacuuming out the stuff that fell down. That's the extension in the electrolysis. That's a big piece of plastic we put in here, and we thought we had a leak from the A coil, but it wasn't. It was from this drain that's over here. The cross actually got goofed up. Everybody told me it was from the A coil, the condensate drain. It wasn't. Okay, I've just put a thin film of oil a couple places where this was rusty, just so it'll slide in there better. You don't need to, it's just easier to do if you one man. Okay, when I put this thing back, again, you got to make sure you don't have any wires in the way. Got them all lifted up, so I'm going to get down on the floor here and then go through and look to make sure I'm not clipping any wires. Easy to do, just to get it started up on the rails. It's a little bit tight over there by that switch. Here you got to make sure you don't cut some of the wires off. Once I got it started, it should slide right in. Right at the point of engagement on the dovetail type deal, there was where it sits on the frame of the furnace. And now I'm going to go ahead and push it inside there. Again, I got to go make sure I don't have any wires hung up. Make sure the wires are on top. I have gloves on because pushing against this is real sharp. This part here was kind of a little bit hairy. I had to stop and get the wire around the edge there. I'm going to make sure this is not going to get cut. A lot of stuff this can get hung up on. These wires on this other side here. There's the screws I'm going to put in here. Okay, I got the blower completely in. I've got the bolts there tight. I had to kind of bend the sheet metal around on this piece. I kind of don't move it just a little bit to get the hold of the line. I put a little bit of grease on there because I'm going to be the only one taking this apart before this thing is scrapped. And they were just kind of like booger bear to get off. I don't know why they were so darn tight. I think they just got rusted on there. So I'm going to go ahead and hook up the safety switch and then hook up the wire to the motor. Here's my little cheat sheet I put on there just so if I forget, I know what the heck I'm doing. I got the motor wires plugged in. This one you have to kind of hold the connector in the back. It wants to kind of push through. And I've got the safety switch wired in. This is the left furnace and its control board. This is the right furnace and its control board. This has got what they call a twinning unit, a big mess that ties the two together. Got a schematics pretty hairy. And that's for the two-stage heater that goes through and turns first one on first and the second one. That's why I'm a little bit paranoid when wiring up something you're not familiar with. It's kind of hard to figure out. Just the single blower operation is much easier to not get it screwed up. But you get something more complex, sometimes I put little clues like this to myself how to wire it up. I'm also going to put down here notes in pencil when I oiled it. Pencil works real well. Sharpie works sometimes too. If it gets hot, it tends to boil off. Here I was fooling around with the orifices. It's got 42 orifices size in there. So I'm going to go ahead and fire this sucker up just to make sure it goes. Got the panel off here for some other repairs. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and turn that breaker on for the furnace. Okay, got it turned on. Running pretty smooth. Got to put the covers on because what's doing is sucking air from here instead of through the filters. If you're done with a job like this, make sure you don't leave your tools in. I went ahead and vacuumed this out. Didn't use the furnace that much this year. Got to put this little cover on the side, button this up. This is the newer electronic motor board, motor controller here. ICM 271. Already had one of these blow, and I've got another one. This is the original one, which has got relays on it that are mechanical. What happens on these sometimes is the capacitor on here, the charging capacitor for timer, goes bad and you can replace that, or the relay will stick and it'll keep on running. If you bump this with a wrench, it'll stop. This particular one I've had problems just blowing up due to lightning storms and stuff. So the two original ones are from 30 years ago. Replace one. This one's already blown up. Put another one in there. I've got a spare I've got to put on this one because this one tends to stick. So I only did one of these because the other one seems to run real nice. There it is spinning around in there. So I'm going to put notes of my future self on there in pencil, what I did that I pulled it out, because you keep it in a logbook, but sometimes just marking it on the darn unit, if it's your own unit, is good. A dumb pencil works really well because it doesn't tend to fade out. It doesn't evaporate. Kind of caveman technology. This is a gas-fired furnace here. 125,000 BTU carrier. Right now we got a coil up here. We got two suctions, two liquids, two 5-ton coils. That's the test port here for the carbon monoxide tester. And that's it. That's the oiling of the motor. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this on here. I got sloppy on here where I marked Mobil 1 2006, but I know I didn't pull the sucker out. I just did the inner one. The one from 1997 is when I pulled the entire unit out. So we start another log below this. Here's a note I just put on there for my future self. The speeds on here they run different speeds depending on where your ducting is. They run different speeds sometimes for heating versus cooling. This is actually a 4-speed motor, so you can change around the setup. And that's why you have 2 relays on here. You've got cooling mode and heating mode. So you can change what you want as far as the CFM coming. Here's the burners. It's a standing pilot, so I turn the pilot light off, mark it on the calendar. It saves about $1 a month, $1.50. Gas company couldn't tell me how much it is, but that's about what it is in our bill, about $1.50 a month to run 2 pilots. So I'm going to go ahead and button this up. Now that I got both covers on here, we'll pull one of these out. Got a pretty good airflow here because now it's forcing it to go through there's 3 filters on this unit. There's 2 18 by 30s and there's a 14 by 25. And on the other side of the room here, there's a lot of CFM with those 4 blowers going. What happens if you got a clogged filter, you're going to tend to pull it around other areas. There's the wire tie I put on the zoom spout. Use different colors for different types of oils. That's the Mobil one. House 32 3P 182 1075 RPM, 4-speed, half horsepower. Looks like the line is white, black is high, yellow is medium, blue is medium low, and red is low. And the 2 brown wires are the caps. Thermally protected 7.5 microfarad cap. 115 volts, 9 amps is what this thing says. 115 volt motor. Again, what I've been doing is going ahead and sticking a piece of straw or something and getting inside here to where you can get the end of the shaft. And you can do that sometimes if you can't get to the oiler on top without removing it. You're just only 1 bearing. I've been doing that for a while and then can't get to this other end, so I've got to go ahead and do this. Now, what I did last time, I don't think I took the blower off. You can sneak something around here, get to the end of the shaft. That's kind of a hokey way to do it. I'm really not going to try to pull the blower off on this. It's just a lot of work. If I can get enough oil in there so it's fairly easy to move, but I know this other one's a little bit dry. This is a sleeve bearing.